package, you should
Okay,
use
so
yours.
that's.
So you should use your EID.
Can I use my own computer?
Yeah, because you should be able to be in that way, yes, absolutely. You can use your district laptop, if that makes it easier. Absolutely, if that makes it easier, please do that. Board 123 will work, but because these are attached to your personal EID as a board director, when you log in as generic board, it doesn't connect.
This has to do with.
Right, and we'll talk about the whys again, and
Absolutely.
that's why the folders, and we'll talk about
Do I need to plug in my own?
You can, if you'd like to.
I mean, what's the benefit of one of that?
So you can see your comments if you'd like to
Oh,
that way.
okay. Okay, because you don't have them?
I have them up, and you'll be able to see them on the screen, but if you wanted to follow along on your own laptop, you can do that. I don't know what that's here.
Okay. Okay, whatever. I'm learning as I'm going. I learned.
So if we want to start on, we just can log in from.
Yep, you can log in like yourself onto the device, and it'll pull up your folder. And then we'll start with kind of what I see in the process, and then we'll get right to the work. So good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Saturday. What you have in front of you, I think in terms of handouts, let's talk about those first. I'll make sure Karen uploads those as well. Neither one is really new information. The first is just a copy of a chunk of the email that I sent when I sent a folder of kind of the priority of which ones were considered essential, which ones were considered encouraged, which ones were discretionary, and which ones were district only or district specific policies. And for today, unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to start with the essential and then move through the encouraged, and then we'll kind of continue on that way. So that just lays out kind of the order that we'll flow through. And then the second document is just the review and the summary of all the 1000 series, which you received before, but I wasn't sure if you brought it with you, so I just brought it again. And it helps us, help all of us just summarize what the changes were per WASDA and give us a good springboard to start the discussion around those different policies. And they are in numerical order, so we will have to jump around rather than that piece. So I'll give everybody a few more minutes to get set up. It's okay to have it twice. Right.
So this is the order we're going in.
Yes.
So I have 14 minutes to go.
So that's where we're gonna start. And like I said, you don't have to have your device up and on, it's just if you want to follow along that way, you can. So I'll start with kind of the process and what we did. And so you can see, this is probably the first time you'll see everyone else's in this way. So when we go through this process, what I've done is I created a general policy work folder that I have access to, Tim has access to, and as WASDA gives new series updates, I just put them in as a folder. And then from this, I copy it and I put it into you all's individual folders. And so if I open up Director Bettinger's, it looks just like mine. The only difference is she and I are the only two people that have access to this. So in terms of what's shared, same thing for every other director folder. So President Hamada looks exactly the same, but only she and I have access. And that's just to prevent the sharing of and communication and discussion of policy outside of an open public meeting. The reason I have access is that I can't reconcile the comments if I can't see what you've done until the moment that we're here, and that kind of makes it a little bit difficult. And so what I did this go around, because it's our first time, I didn't compile them into one document. What I did in my folder in the 1000 series looks a little bit more convoluted than it will moving forward. I copied over your particular, I copied the version that you did, tagged it with your initials, and pulled it in. So as we talk about the policy, I will pull up the different feedback and comments from directors. The different feedback from directors on the screen so we can discuss those so that points are heard and they're not missed. Of course, you all are obviously at the table, so if you, discussion is welcome. That's the whole point of this. And so that's how they're tagged here. I'm not going to put these into you all's folders again. I don't want to convey it on the public meeting, but that's how they're all showing up. So it's just a copy of the document that you made changes to in here pure. So we will start with 1400 is first. Sort these by name. So I'm going to start with the WASDA version of this. Every document that you all open up in your individual folders has track changes enabled. One, it makes it easier. You don't have to remember to catalog your changes. The other is it allows you to see immediately when you open it the changes that WASDA made, the formatting changes that Pam made without question. So for WASDA purposes, it's essential. They just provided more clarity about the operation of board meetings, and constitutional considerations were added per WASDA. So you see the changes that are more closely related to kind of changes in law, changes from a board superintendent governance perspective per WASDA there in blue. I will start with President Hamada just because it shows up first in the order. Have the fortunate benefit of having the first initial show up in alphabetical order. So when I click the little comment window here, it allows me to quickly see. It's nice too when you start changes this way. It colors them differently for each editor. So you all's comments show up in purple. It made it really easy for me to skim and then see what questions were and comments were.
Why was every other series in a different color? Was that a good purpose?
Sometimes it in purple.
It's a function of just
Okay.
Microsoft is default, and it may be, it sometimes has to do with how many other editors there were before this
Never
point.
mind. Got it.
But it's helpful for me that every editor shows up in a different color because it makes it really easy for me to see when you all have made comment.
But I mean, mine was in different colors.
Yeah, yeah, and there's ways that you can go in and set your color permanently, but it's not worth it. I don't even do it. It's just not worth it to
I'm
go
lucky
through.
to find the thing and work on it.
You did well. I was able to see your comments and get those, so it worked out fine from that perspective for me. And we can talk a little bit later about whether or not this worked for you all and what we need to change moving forward. But when you click the little comments, I could see that President Hamada made comments and posed a question here around the definition of a presiding officer in terms of what that means. And so, presiding officer is probably it is a formal term for president of the board in terms of presiding officer. I don't believe that there's a legal reason why we couldn't change that to president of the board if that is something that's more comfortable to the board to say. That is just the formal language that would likely show up.
And that's really the genesis for the word president, and the idea of the president of any organization. The definition is that they preside over.
Right, I just think it's
So what happens when the president is not available? So let's say they're out for a couple of months. I think that's why it's presiding officer.
Okay,
Because at that time it's all
that's,
down.
okay, that makes
way he
sense.
would be treated as-
Right, and then, right, there are times when the vice president
Okay,
is
thank you
the
for clarifying.
providing officer.
I think that's great, I understand.
So that was just one piece. That was the comment from President Hamada. Moving on, Director Bettinger.
So my question, and I'll share it, is, you know, when I look at the board meetings, it's like there's important work to be done in the summer months, especially around the budget. And, you know, we don't have board meetings in July, but then there were like several board meetings in July last year for consent agendas, which, you know, kind of defeats the purpose because then the public can't come speak, even if they're a small meeting with just a few items, I think. I'm trying to understand. It looks like it's been going on forever and ever that that's been happening, but it doesn't follow policy, so.
You have meetings in July, it's just a calendar
calendar was done up until the school year, the calendar then for the next school year's July would be the public.
If there's never any, I haven't seen any regular meetings scheduled in
Regular.
There
It's
isn't?
full of, instead of any issues. It's just that most of the staff is, some staff are off in summer, so it's just kind of a,
I'm sorry, didn't say.
Yeah, it
You have
just,
work
yeah, you have work sessions and consent, the special meetings where there's a consent agenda, but it just, I've never understood why there's not at least one board meeting in July, because that's when we're finalizing budget and things like that.
So we,
Yeah, that's my question.
so I will provide that perspective, and then I will step back out of the why, because like I said, history says that I've never experienced that mine either. So that is one of the reasons why we start our budget conversations with the board so very early, so that we're up to a point of not completion, but probably far along by the time we have our last regularly scheduled board meeting at the end of June. It'll be an interesting perspective now because of the RCW related to us having to submit a budget to the ESD and to OSBI by July 10th. Again, that doesn't mean that our budget is final. The board doesn't typically adopt a budget until August, but it would be bad form, I think, for a district to have substantial and drastic changes from what they submit to OSBI to what is adopted. We know that there are going to be exceptions to that because there are years that we're bargaining up until the start of the school year, and obviously those things and those changes need to be reflected sometimes in budget. So even though we submitted something to OSBI as per the law, there still would be changes to that before the board adopts or has to re-adopt the budget. So it's not that it can't happen. I would say from the HR side, even though Mariah's not at the table, one of the reasons that we have the consent agenda items during the summer is that the board has to approve appointments and hires at the administrator level. Mostly it is building principals, because you can't start school year without a principal or an assistant principal. So those are typically what happens. But again, and it's mostly because we try to get that before the school year starts, so they can start their work and prepare with their staffs. But as far as not having regular meetings and the true why, it's unfortunate for me to say this out loud that way. It's just my experience hasn't been that Kent has ever done that. And I don't think any others do regionally. I think they just schedule it per the school calendar year. So because the school calendar kind of ends at the end of June and starts back up again kind of early September or late August, that's how this board and others have their board meetings. But there's nothing pro WAFTA that says that it has to be that way or should be that way.
And just something I've learned too is that just because WASDA suggests that policy, the only thing we really have to work on and provide policy is an RCW, right? Want to weigh in on that, Kim?
Well, I guess I'm not sure what the question is, Director.
It's not a question, it's a statement.
Right, okay. So can you repeat that? I'm not sure that I understood.
You're asking about
It
policy
is
requirements.
suggested to follow a lot of WASDA information and things that they provided, but we don't have to. The only thing we have to develop policy around is I've been asking a lot of questions as far as
I mean, yes, I think that you're right to a certain extent. It's WASDA model policies are just that, they're models, right? And so they don't fit for all situations and all school districts. And as as Jewel has pointed out, most of these policies are encouraged or discretionary. If you wanted to run, hypothetically, a district could run with very few actual policies in place. There may be some legal risks associated with that, and some issues with operational side of things. But there are no strict laws requiring.
No, I mean, it's just been a learning process for me how policies are developed because you guys are on the inside, you work with this. This is not my degree field or business field that I've been in, so I'm learning.
And typically, a lot of the updates are driven by some law change
Right.
or some court case related to an operational decision, and that's where we see the adjustments that way. And so,
And some of them are not, they're just WASDA's.
right, lots of interpretation or suggestion based on, yes. I would say that the ones that I tend to pay the most attention to when they send those updates are the ones that are related to a court case or some court decision that because of an interpretation, a legal interpretation of a policy or something.
I understand.
Yes, that those are the ones that we want to probably
Yes.
attend to most.
Yes.
And then truly the others, and so that goes back to what Tim was responding to as well. So what I'm hearing, because as we go through this, I want to come to some consensus and decision for what we are moving forward. So I'm not gonna let us walk away from a policy until I hear some consensus about what we're doing next steps with the policy that's up. So we've got one more comment from another director to review, and then we'll talk about kind of what we've heard in the discussion and then where we go next. So it talks here about our regular board meetings and the times. And one of the comments here was about not mentioning names of individuals, I'm assuming, for that comment. And then the second comment here. What could be?
I did have one, I did write notes just in
Okay.
case this isn't good work.
Yeah.
So I had training for, I don't feel like we're following this was working on a team, but we're not really asking for sessions, including programming, we've had issues over the years of that. And so I was thinking about training, and should we have that as part of the policy that the board will go through some sort of training on that at some point.
So that's open for discussion with you all. That's,
And we have a policy about taking the training, within 90 days of taking the training, open government training and things, so I know, but we could perhaps add that to that policy, say that we could also take training on Robert's rules within 90 days, or and thereafter. I mean, then,
It has to be in there.
yeah, yeah, right.
Well, and I've had the privilege, because the city of Covington provided me a whole day of Robert Rules of Orders, and even after that whole day, I felt kind of lost, and McFarland, I believe, led that, it was excellent, but just need refreshers all the time.
Yeah, you have to do it for the school board. I've done finance training outside of school districts.
Is that the dinosaur theme one? I've heard that that's where Jurassic.
She's amazing. She's a good friend of mine.
She does a good job. I really enjoyed it,
First nuances that are different in the schools.
definitely.
So I'm hearing about adding that possibly to 1822, which speaks to continuous education and development for board members. So not negating, so that maybe what I'm hearing, it seems like this policy is not necessarily the right place to put it, but definitely adding that to 1822. So I just made a note to decide when we get there to bring that back up again.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
I have some other comments.
I'm sorry, I'll go back to you first. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so here we are. It talks about the board and the voice vote and doing an oral roll call there's certain discussion topics that have to have an oral roll call vote. There are very few of those. So mostly it's just a voice vote of the collective. But you said here that we've been doing vote by raising right hand and saying yay or nay. And the question is, do you want to be that specific in the policy for the actions of this board?
Well, I mean, is that something that's developed?
Yes.
We developed it because, so a couple of reasons, mainly because people who were watching the video could not always hear.
Okay.
So that's why we started raising our hand while we were doing
Well, actually, that too, and Karen couldn't hear.
Oh,
She sits on the edge.
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
So is that to be in our policy then?
here it is called out and specified the type of vote action that's needed, and it says oral roll call.
And I think you are essentially doing oral roll call, you're just using an additional signal. So I don't think what we're doing right now is out of alignment with this policy. But if you wanted to specifically include that in there, you know.
Karen couldn't hear yes or no, and she's always asking who's in.
Absolutely. And also not hearing or being able to see just because of the shape of their eyes.
But to me, coming in as a new board member, having more information in front of me how we're going to do, we're doing it consistently. I'm sorry, I'm just like a dog. I have to continually do something to get it right. And I just, if we're going to do it, why don't, I mean, how much trouble it is to have it correct on policy?
It's not, I mean, if it's,
Would that be helpful to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just speaking personally to me because I got to be consistent.
Well, and then, you know, like I read all the policies before I started too, and it's like if I mean, and I've been to a lot of board meetings, so I see that that's how it's done. But for someone completely new, it would be helpful to be able to see that you raise your right
Well, I mean,
hand.
it's picky, but I mean,
Well, Karen does write that in the protocol. She writes it up, so we,
So you could read the protocol.
no, I totally understand what I'm saying. Somebody that doesn't have that in front of them, which most of the audience does not, and if they want to run for the school board and they're sitting in the audience, it just develops all that. They can read the policies. They don't watch our procedure. I mean, they may come to a board meeting. I'm just saying consistency just helps me. That's all. So that's all. I don't want to make work for anybody.
I don't see that. I don't see how.
This was work for me.
So there's a consensus that we're adding this to the language to laws.
And if it also appears in the procedure, doing
Yeah.
it similarly there.
Yeah.
I just made the note in the main version to I've got an action items, next steps, kind of area catalog.
And I had another comment.
I'm going back.
It's under, the board recognizes the value of public comment. My note was, at present, we are not doing public comment. At the beginning of the meetings, the board may change to will. I'd like to see there be a short period of public comments at the beginning of our meetings.
So a few thoughts about that,
Sure.
or questions, I guess. How would we determine who would get to comment at the beginning and then who at the end? One of the things we need to be really careful about is viewpoint discrimination, right? And so we need to have we would have to have some way of very neutrally selecting those folks who would be able to comment at the beginning as opposed to at the end.
What about students and school staff? Because they have to get up early in the morning.
Well, we're speaking specifically to items, though, so that's the thing also, right?
Right.
What do they want to speak to?
Sorry, are we getting on to 1420? Because that's on the agenda.
It is, but there's a chunk of 1400 that speaks to public attendance and comment.
I'm looking at page 4.
Yes. And there's been a shift in the language around public comment, and just in terms of what WASDA's model recommendation is around that.
And to be clear, there's no legal requirement that it appear at any point, or that you take a comment.
I read the law.
You don't need to take any comment if you don't want to. I mean, that's not common practice, right?
But that's not effective two-way
Well,
communication.
and I know, I'm just telling you what the legal requirements are.
Right.
And we want to be fair, I think I want to go back to what Tim said, to really emphasize that we want to be neutral in what we're either restricting or advocating the space for. So there do need to be some clear delineations of what is cut, or where we cut off, not what is cut off.
One of the-
Student comment would be appropriate, because I do agree with you that
Yeah.
we're having to wait and look at any of those goals.
I'm sorry. One of the things to also consider is, some boards will put a limit on the total amount of comments. Like, I mean, we obviously wouldn't want to be here until 3 a.m. taking comments. That would be a very rare situation. So you could limit the total amount of time. With that, though, you want to limit each individual type of comment, right? And state how long each individual has to speak. And
We've
if
done that once before we had to.
you limited the total amount of time.
That's a common practice.
Yeah.
When that's happening before. And I think just to reemphasize this is the one time where equality is most important. We provide the amount of time per speaker. And we need to reemphasize that, because what we're then saying is that someone's comment is more important than another if we allow commenter A to have 3 minutes and 40 seconds or 7 minutes, and everyone else has something. So that's another emphasis for us as well.
I think though, my emphasis, and one of my main reasons for being on the school board is to have the community be more part of the school. And I've gone to, I've gone to Kansas City Council meetings, Auburn, Covington, and I like the way Covington does it. They have public comment at the beginning, they have public comment in the middle, they have public comment at the end. And it doesn't elongate their meetings. And I just feel that, especially in some of the things we've gone through here, right or wrong, I just want our community to really have their voice heard and do everything we can to have that. And when we prioritize them, I mean, I've sat here in board meetings, but probably it's where there's been more comments than ever during rifts or whatever was going on in contracts. And then I think one meeting went till midnight or something, which is kind of hard. But I mean, the public has to be heard, even if we're just listening. And I just feel that putting them, a few of them, and I mean, most of the time you don't have that many people making public comments. I've been to board meetings for 5 years, I think. But I mean, on the rare occasion that you do, you might have to really get strict about this stuff. But if we want to be inclusive, if we want to have equity, if we want to have community voice, it has to start, to me, with the board.
I will say that I think this started around having comment at the beginning of the meeting. And so I think that because we talk about equality here, you want to be clear in what you're setting out from the beginning, because it's not, people won't call it into question during our regular board meetings. You're right. A handful of people want to comment, and it's not a big deal. It will become problematic, and our rationale will be called into question in those rare instances, because we can't wait until the meeting that lots of people want to speak to then determine and be strict about how many people or the length of time at the beginning of the meeting. So we don't want to wait until we walk into a room, or the week that we walk into, we're getting ready for a board meeting, and there's lots of people who have been calling or wanting to discuss something or reaching out to the board, to then say, okay, we're only going to have comment at the beginning for an hour, or we're only going to take the first 20 people. You want to make sure that you're clear about that from before, because at that point you are starting to restrict perspectives. So I think you need to have some conversation now about those exception meetings that could run long. The other piece that I want to point out too, and not to sway or anything like that, but just to bring to the front, if you're having comment at the beginning of a meeting, regardless of the length that you all decide, there's still the business meeting portion of this that would occur afterwards. And so it's fine to know that that doesn't shift the length of a midnight meeting, it just shifts where conversation is happening, depending on how long you want to allow for that space of comment at the beginning.
But it does publicly say that if you have to get up and you're a working person and you can't stay till 10, you have a 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. shift, that your voice still can be heard, and you can come in, you can testify, and you can leave and get home and take care of your kids or whatever.
All of us, we're all working people that have to, so I understand what you're saying, but I think you also, so one of the things I think about is staff, because they have to stay the entire, at least, I think that some of them, if they can leave, that we're paying them to be there, and that can be an extended stretch of time. When someone could leave a public comment, they don't have to stay necessarily, because those public comments can take, we've sat here for hours, not on rare instances, but I mean, I think we also have to consider others as well. And it is our board meeting, it's the meeting of the board. And I don't think we've never denied public comment, and we can stay and listen but I think, and what you speak about, all of us have those. We all have kids, we all have families, we all work on it, most of us. So I think in that consideration, yes, it is a consideration, but it applies to staff as well as public, as well as.
But I mean, excuse me, if you're limiting the amount in the beginning, you're only probably going to add 30 minutes. I would say you limit the time for the people in the beginning, but you can still have an end comment. So you're only adding 30 minutes at the most to any board meeting for staff.
Well, then who would you determine who speaks?
The first one, first come, first served. I mean, I don't think we've ever had 30 minutes of comment. No, I've gone to a lot of meetings, Denise, but it's not on a regular.
There's been several more than
No,
that.
I know No, yeah,
Okay,
I for
so-
5 years, to be fair, but I mean, on the average.
So,
That's all that's happening.
so first, I think yes, this is the board's meeting, but the board was elected to represent the public, so I think the public needs to comment. This exact issue with a lot of comments came out, I went to a WASTA breakout session, and they talked about it, and it was a school district that had a big kerfluffle that was coming up, and so they purposely and publicly let their constituents know that they were gonna change the way they did public comment to allow for more, but they were limiting the time, and they set it out very clearly, because they knew there were gonna be a lot of people coming, and so they deviated from what was standard, and just said, because we know you have a lot of passion around this, they also had a work session beforehand, so people could come and listen to the district talk about what had gone on, so that then when they came to the meeting, some of them actually, they said, it turned out that they just said, a student just said something that, so I don't need to comment anymore. So they were very purposeful about doing that. That said, I agree with Leslie, I think there needs to be public comment at the beginning, but I think, just even having students or teachers, because, I know like even when the Northwood Choir came, they were done at like 7:30 and they have 0 hour choir at 6:40 the next morning, so, so it's, I would say students and maybe teachers or at the beginning,
And one of the things that I noticed when Dr. Vargas was here, we had some controversy over, I think, music, PE, and I don't know if the arts was on that, but he had a town hall, he had a Kentwood, and there were tons of people that came in. And so maybe when you have these really controversial things that are coming up, you could have a different format.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, that during those times when we had levy bonds, all those town halls, then we had an allotted time, and we say, give everybody up to 2 minutes, so this is the. But for regular board meetings, is what we're talking about, how do we want to handle that?
So my slight concern about, just changing procedure in response to, knowing that there would be a lot of comment coming, is that could be seen as limiting, as the district wanting to limit comments because of a particular time. And so that's the
no, they
issue that I
changed
think
procedure
tools.
to add time.
Oh, to add.
They
time
add,
to
so
it,
they
okay.
usually only had a 30-minute comment period,
Oh, got
they
it.
changed it to add time.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so,
So we've never had a total.
so that district had a 30-minute comment period, and they adjusted to add time, so,
Got it.
for this, if we have only students at the beginning, it might be just, we say, you know what, people only want to talk about this, so let's just let anyone talk at the beginning, and let them say their piece, and then, we'll be done.
So I do understand that with the time limit, I think that's good. I think that, I would rather us, if we're gonna be open, to just be open. Because I don't want us to get into a debate with our public about who decides what's important enough to extend comment and what's not.
Right.
Because then that becomes an interpretation of,
Right.
well, you value this particular topic, and now you don't value this, and you're not extending this time. I did make the note about student, and what might be a compromise to get us to consensus on this is saying that we'll add student, or we can say something about prioritizing student staff comments at the beginning of the meeting for a period no longer than 60 minutes. Is that fair, or 30 minutes?
I was
or-
thinking 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then all other comments being at the end of the
Or-
meeting, or during their agenda item
Yeah.
to do the traditional.
So you have a lot of,
Okay.
I mean, right or wrong, you're seeing all over social media, people are saying they don't feel like they have a voice in the school. I don't know if this is gonna change their feeling, but I'm saying change comes through little things, and that's the only reason I'm indicating that. And the other thing that's really hard for me is when people are talking and that buzzer goes off, and I hate telling people, stop, I'm raising my, I mean, how can we do that so it's much more, I don't know.
Raise up a little,
Well, there's a couple
yellow,
things.
red.
There's
Yeah.
a couple things we can do, and we have a, I'll just say, a plan in place, because I understand, you're not
I feel,
comfortable
it
with
feels rude to me to say, okay,
Yeah.
be quiet, shut up.
So that would be rude. I don't disagree. I think there are ways that it can be said. So there are school districts that have a script to simply say, so this is not personal, that we need to continue with the meeting, in the business of the meeting. So you have 2 minutes, and I'm going to have to ask you to please finish your comment, and then repeat the statement. We have to continue our meeting. That's one way I've heard and seen. There's another way that we do have. So imagine we're trying to find the best way to attach a timer. And I think I shared this when I visited
Yeah.
a school
I think
district to
that would
see
be
a timer.
that
So
would
because
be
people
good.
they can't speak
Visualize.
necessarily and then keep 2 minutes or 3 minutes in their mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
if
they
it's
can
just
see it
showing on
here.
the, even showing on the screen,
Absolutely.
just a timer.
We have that in place. We just have to put that to work. So that's one.
I think that would help a lot.
And that also goes to valuing other people's comments too,
Yes.
right? Because if somebody,
I
goes over their time, it's about valuing everybody and
That's
getting everybody heard, right?
And I just think it's rude.
Yeah.
I just don't feel comfortable.
But if it's a timer, then,
I mean, we have a boxing ring thing that just really, I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
Kids are in the
That would be
ring,
good.
Yeah,
and the ring is over, it's red and booms out.
you just cut out the microphone, just turn off the microphone.
And it just, I mean, you know you're done, yeah.
Yeah, that's rude, yes,
Yeah,
very
I
good.
like the idea of the timer.
Yeah,
And
I-
people can have
yes.
visual and just say, acknowledge when I start
Yeah.
talking,
Mhm.
there's a timer, please be aware of it. and-
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, a lot of people just don't take the time to read through it and see how long it takes them to actually read their comment. And they're very passionate about things, and they've got, you can tell when someone walks up and they've got like 5 pages of type, this small type that it's gonna take, takes about a minute to read the page.
So I think we've reached some consensus, and I think I've gotten somewhere. So it's not exactly the right wordsmith language, but what I put up here is that comments, well, at the beginning of the meeting will be prioritized as students, staff, and public for a comment period not to exceed 30 minutes. All other comments can occur during the regular comment period at the end of the meeting or prior to the agenda item per our regular blah, blah, blah. That's how it will show up. Does that seem like, okay, great. I think Director Hamada, let's see.
Oh, I had another comment.
Yep, you did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, I got you.
Yeah.
Here we are.
A board member can choose to address the individual making public comments through questions and comments if so desired to do so. That's what I wanted to add.
Again, that came up during that breakout session, and they said it's very problematic if you're at, like, once in a rare while, they'll ask clarifying questions, like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what school you were talking about, or whatever, but that then people started engaging in a dialogue, and so, but they did say that they very much limited that to clarifying questions, if it
It's
was.
happened with one board member before,
Yeah.
the stuff, that was actually,
And I think people are able, what I know they've done with me is they come up afterwards
Mhm.
and said something, which is fine. But I would agree with that.
Another comment that we, so in other ways we address that is if there is a situation with a student or concerned citizen or staff member, that we have staff here for that reason, to make sure that they do not leave before they are addressed by a staff member.
Do we, I mean, is that public? No. Because you just told me something I didn't.
Well, it just depends on the situation. So typically I will make that comment or I'll signal to make sure that they touch base with the person before they leave. That's just a staff procedure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think that's an important component.
Well, it doesn't always happen though, so I think it's situational based.
Okay, that's
So
good to
if
know too
it
then.
doesn't always happen, then I think it's not always necessary or appropriate. But I do know that people do come up and talk to us, at least people come up to the guys.
Yeah.
So if they have a question, they do come and talk to us, but I would not want to engage while they were making comments.
I'm not saying engaging, I'm just saying like,
Where do you stop the conversation? If they decide they want to have a conversation, that would be really rude to say, okay, I can't talk to you anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? So where do you stop it?
I just wouldn't have a problem with me. I understand with individuals that could go on, but I mean, if I just said, see me later, or I'd like to talk to you later, it would be something like that. But
You know, can we,
I hear.
could that be added to even the language, you know, we talk about public comment period saying, and if after you make your public comment, you want to talk to someone, just stay after the meeting and you can, you know, reach out to a board director. You know,
I understand the logic behind it, makes sense, that there may not be, if it's a staff, there may not be staff there specifically. And that's one of the reasons when I make that comment, I know that someone is there.
Get in touch with, I mean, it can't just be the president, we want us, or we want to.
I think the thing that I struggle with is because I'm such a communication major, first of all, that's my degree. But you stand up there and then they're done and they feel kind of like, did anybody hear me? Is anybody going to do anything about this? I mean, what, you know, if you want to make a person's voice heard, and maybe I'm asking the impossible, but I just feel like there needs to be another step beyond that.
So let's say, I think when we read that big long statement in the beginning, you know, it says that it's the meeting of the board and we are listening for comments we will not respond to. So we're stating that if you want to, you know, work on some verbiage there, I mean, that could be something we could add.
I just think it would be more friendly to me, more open to me. It just needs to be.
If you suggest some language, you know,
Okay.
I think the challenging part of things like Dr. Watt said, there's not necessarily a guarantee that someone can stay after the fact.
I get that too.
So trying to figure out what that looks like.
well, some things too, I mean, we're going to be talking about the agenda next, but I think they're, you know, old business on the agenda, and then sometimes people talk about something at a board meeting, or they ask a question, and then just circling back, closing the loop at the next board meeting even could be helpful to people, and then they can feel heard. You know, we heard several comments about XYZ at the last board meeting, and, you know, here's,
That would be a way too.
you know, that's old, you just add an old business on the agenda, you know, and that's a way, you know, if it's not, it's like the comments fall into there's people, as what I've seen over the years is, there's people that comment about a specific incident specific to them or their child that isn't like a global issue necessarily, and then there's a lot of people that talk about big overarching issues, and, you know, for those, you know, for the individual issues, it's probably a one-off, just, like, I try and snag people at the end of a board meeting too if they've commented, and just say thank you for commenting, but if it's a bigger overarching issue, closing the loop with old business might help people feel heard more, and that things didn't go into the void.
So one thing that I wanted to add to the conversation about where you place this or having a dialogue with the community in the midst of a board meeting is, so in the interest of the board and the district, I don't ever want you all to be in a position where you're commenting on something that might be either against the law or something that we're required to do. There are times sometimes when we're sitting, so I will say me personally, I won't own this and say we for anyone else. There are times when I am sitting in a board meeting and hearing someone say something that's a comment, and I'm like, well, although in my mind I may personally agree with what you're saying, I know that there's a law preventing us from doing something or saying that we have to, or there's contractual obligations that say that this has to happen this way. And so I don't want you all to ever be put into a position where you're having a dialogue with someone, leading them down a path where they believe that something different is going to, and I'm not saying that you're intending to promise that, but sometimes that happens without you having the full awareness of what is required or what contractually is there. So just know that I think that that was probably why they said they try to limit that very much. Because I don't ever want you all, especially in public, in being put in that position. So
I get that, it's just like, if I came up there and poured my heart about something, of course, I just go up and keep talking to people because I don't have that. But I mean, let's say you really build up your courage to come and testify, you're Somali or something, that this is kind of new for you, that you haven't, and it just, okay, then what? I just think it's kind of like, okay, and then what happens to that person? I don't know what what the answer is, but I mean, just like with all the letters that I've gotten and stuff, I ask to be kept in the loop to see what's going, if I pass it on to Dr. Watts or whoever's supposed to take care of it. I want to know. I don't want to know that I just wrote this nice flowery letter and then nothing happened. It's just a continual stream of communication. I don't know. It's a personal problem, and we're still on number one, and it's now
Well, this is
8:45.
the work.
This is the
right,
work,
this is why-
this is the work.
This is right, and I don't believe it's
And
always.
in instances like that too, like I said, just closing the loop it might be the next board meeting, but I think that if you build that process, then people will start feeling heard. Because it's like, I heard someone asking a question at the last board meeting about XYZ, and I just wanted to give, if Dr. Harmon knows the background of something, and just like, I just want to give the background on this, and here's, so it's that old business, and then it's like, and then we just share that. And you can reiterate too, I think, just remember, this isn't a dialogue, we're listening to you, and, and it's only for listening. And then, like I said, I think if we add that whole business piece to the agenda and just close the loop on some of this stuff, even if it's just to say, we don't have an answer yet, but we heard you at the last board meeting, and
Or per RCW cannot,
yeah,
we
Yeah.
heard what you said, but this is
Yeah.
impossible for us.
like I think about the guy who was very passionate about his kindergartner, right? And so in that case, because he wanted to, and I've seen it now come up again in the group where someone with a child that's turning 5 in November asking
really
about the cutoff
3.
date. Yeah,
And really 3 when I found out.
yeah, and the cutoff date and things like that, but it's even closing the loop and saying, here's what we've learned, research has shown that, this or that, and this is the way the district does this.
So I'm hearing two things here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing something that's related to the board meeting and agenda, and I'm also hearing something about how staff keep the board informed. And so I apologize for the length sometimes of my board updates, but I've started to give you all more meat and discussion and information so that you understand the backstory of what's happening. And I think that's a way that sometimes we can help you all be informed about the rule or the why that would allow you some support in speaking to or addressing some of these things.
That's it, and I appreciate that comment, Director Badger, what you just shared, the gentleman who spoke about it. I met with him 3 times.
Right. I was gonna say, and how many times do you say the same
No,
information?
and it was a productive,
Right.
so it was 3 times because we had to go through the process and helping them understand the why and what does developmental readiness really mean. And yes, this is the reason why we have these state
Yeah.
parameters and they're actually more similar to statewide and nationwide. So it's not that we're doing something to your child, we're going to help them. And we reached he did give the information he needed. Now, one thing I think about, while I remember putting that in an update, you may not have had the same context of my meeting with this individual 3 times. And as going through the process, he understood, may not have appreciated or agreed with everything, but he understood our why.
Right.
And that's really good.
And even sometimes I think when people like see someone asking a question like that in a board meeting, like I said, if you just close a loop with a quick little sentence of, of old business, this is one question, this is our why, just a quick little comment about, and just old business, this came up, and just start closing some of those loops for people. So then when someone asks later, then it's like, oh, we talked about this at a board meeting, someone brought it up, they closed the loop, and, and then again, it seems to me can be somewhat more efficient, because if one person has a question, other people I figured will have a question, and if we just get into the habit of closing as many loops as possible for constituents so they understand it.
I've been to our website where we're posting questions, answers to the questions.
Yeah.
So this is a so this is now a third piece of this. And not in a bad way, I appreciate it because it helps us, think about like how to, right. So I'm always cautious about one-offs, and it makes me very skittish sometimes when we're sitting in our board meetings. And as they should, a parent will bring up a very passionate issue about their child, but then they start to give details about their child that a lot of people in the room, and I understand that they call themselves advocating, and they are, but I become very anxious when they start to talk about some of the details of their child's personal struggles, and they use their child's name and the grade level and all of that. I'm like, ugh. You could talk to one of us, the board, or out, as a special time, but now you're telling the world this. So I just want us to be careful when we're addressing things like that and answering questions. We want to make sure that we rise into a level of like a general response
Right.
and not that person. So, right, so this particular parent, ironically, this early entry situation that comes up every year, Dr. Watts met with the previous parent, as did I, as did Danelle. We talked about it from policy, we talked about it from the assessment perspective, we talked about it from teaching and learning. This second round, I too have engaged with this parent around the policy perspective of it. Danelle has had conversations with this parent. I know that they emailed the board about this as well. So there are times sometimes when we sit in a board meeting and we can address it to the general public, but I don't want it to be a response.
No,
Right.
I
To
just,
that,
my
okay.
point was, the information that was presented to the board, all of what other districts are doing,
Right.
what is the rationale. That I think could have gone on our website, as an explanation. So not particularly talking about a parent, but just in general what was shared with the board, the reasoning behind it, which I'm sure you shared with him and he understood that. So he had come up with his own facts and then we brought our facts and that didn't match the point. Or we had some other additional information that our districts are doing, that neighborhood districts are doing. But whatever that is, is informative for the board to make certain that the decisions do. And so that rationalization needs to be done. So I think that's.
It's just in general, because I'm sure it comes up every year, right?
Right, so what I'm thinking about is all of this energy that was put into one question. We have multiple questions. So I guess where do we, because that's a lot, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I know that there are questions that come up, and I guess I'm a little concerned as to how often we will be visiting. Let's say we do have a period where we've got 20 questions that came up, and then how are we going to address all 20 of those questions in our board meeting, or should we address all 20 of those questions in our board meeting? I think we have to be cautious around, like I said, that question. And the reality is, because I'm on that board too, you can say something over and over again, and people are not going to listen. So it was answered, but people just for some reason, unless it's the answer that they want, they'll keep asking until they get the answer that they want.
Well-
They're different people. So I'm just saying that that's the same thing. So I do agree that we should have, we did have where people were answering some questions, overarching questions, right? There were overarching answers. But I would just be concerned about trying to address every question or close the loop on every question in particular, because it may take a while to get answers from people. So I think I would rather direct people or whoever they follow up with, have them answer the questions for them. I don't know.
I think we have, so I'm hearing you all in the concern, and I think there's a solution that I can propose. So if we kind of reconstitute a page of kind of, maybe I was wondering, or you've wondered about this, or have you ever asked, I don't know what we'll call it per se, but something like that, and then we start to put in general answers around things, whether it's a reference to an RCW or it's referencing there are contractual obligations, and then maybe we link to our labor partner page so they can review all of the contracts per se or whatever, because I want us to also be careful of not throwing any particular group under the bus and saying, well, it's so-and-so group's fault that this is happening or not, but giving them information and rounding it out there. Then it allows you as a board, during either your comment period or some other period on the agenda, to respond to the public and say, check this website and you will see answers to these items, or the items previously addressed are here in that way.
Because CEP is a good example, I mean, where you went into.
Sorry,
the
but
explanation.
yeah.
No, but we needed that, but how many people saw that? The board
You
saw
all.
it, right? But it's out, what I'm saying is out there,
It's out there.
but they can't access it, right, unless it goes on the website, and they,
So we can, I mean, we talked about ways to put that back, and then that allows you to reference someone to it, and then it's always there, whether the question comes up once or 5 times or every year, the answer can sit and,
Well, and that seems to me, that particular instance seems like it will come up every year, someone will ask, and, you know.
But yes, there are children who are born after September 1.
But if you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, which one is it? That, you know, that if you go to schools, and you're closer to 6 when you start school, you do better. I can't remember the name of it. Outliers, it's outliers. Yeah,
We're still on the first question.
yeah.
What's wrong with me?
You think we're gonna get through all the time?
No, we're not. No, but the essentials we should get through, so.
Yes.
How much time do we have? We have
So
3
we've
hours.
done an hour.
2 hours.
This is real.
Almost 3 hours.
Good conversation.
One of the other pieces that I wanted to call your attention to that's different than our practice right now is on page 4, right below kind of what we're talking about with public comment. It talks about the standards for comments that we will not allow. And the standards that are laid out there are slightly different than the one that we've been using. So it's something that we would want to consider whether we want to adopt this type of standard or if we want to have it be the way we're currently operating. And it lists out the libelous or slanderous, unwarranted invasion of policy, obscene or indecent, violate school district policy and procedure. All of those things, I think are good limitations to have there, and I think would be fine as far as First Amendment concerns go. Wondering though if, we're still interested in moving forward with the, don't mention particular staff names, other things like that. The slight risk in that is if we allow people to speak positively about staff, having them stopping them from speaking negatively about staff could be potentially problematic.
So this is where I think you get into a lot of legislators because of that. If you leave the language that way, it can, it's broad still, and it's up to, but.
And libelous or slanderous would essentially mean that they know that what they're saying is false, right? And that they're essentially dragging somebody.
Or it could be true, and it could be negative. So it could be,
Right.
it might not be libelous, it could be this principal did this to me and it could be very much true.
Well, Curtis has made it very clear to me in the past not to say names, and we've interrupted, he's interrupting things like that, so.
And we've
we
set
have
that
to have
standard,
that.
right?
So we could need to have
add,
something.
add that, maybe under libelous or
Add our language.
add our language about not using names under libelous or slanderous or somewhere.
Yeah, we can keep it, we can work away, work it in there something.
Yeah.
So I have collected all of the comments. The other beauty of OneDrive is that you never have to press save, so that is helpful. You just type to your heart's content and it shows up later, which is great.
No, it freaked me out at first.
It freaks me
It
out.
does, and I still want to hit save anyway because I'm so concerned that it won't,
Yeah.
but it does. So that is helpful. Okay, so I have a few changes, just to review. We talked about adding to the protocol about the board raising their hand as their visual signal of how they vote in addition to their oral signal of how they vote. Student comment at the beginning of the meeting, actually I'm gonna cut this one out because I have a longer one right under it. About comments at the beginning of the meeting, prioritize the student, staff, public comment for a period not longer than 30 minutes. We went through that. KSD language about not naming individuals in terms of the types of comments and adding that our lens. And then this is more just a note to me about other things. So question and answer section on the webpage to address. It's not related to policy and changing policy, but just a note about how we operationalize and act out so that we're closing that loop and there's a continuous way for people to remain informed about issues that continue to come up, or at least a general response to a public comment. And then changing the public comment or card and board protocol. It seemed like you were having some conversation about wanting to